Father's Day last year kicked off just like every other one before it. I was up early, sitting there waiting for Katie, my wife, and our teenage daughters to wake up and join me. On Mother's Day, I always went all out for Katie, starting with mimosas at breakfast, putting together a fancy cheese spread for lunch, and wrapping the day up with her favorite steak for dinner. As the girls got older, I took it upon myself to handle everything. But when Father's Day came around, it was usually Katie who took the reins and whipped up a special breakfast for me. However, last year felt different. I found myself sitting there, hungry, waiting for her to wake up. By the time she finally did, I was famished. She gave me a quick kiss before diving into making breakfast for the family. Later that day, we headed out to this quirky little cafe that served sandwiches with a Doctor Who theme, odd but charming. Katie's always been the master planner in our house. She manages our family schedule down to the smallest detail. Holidays, birthdays, everything gets marked on the calendar, and, honestly, I usually miss most of it. When she pointed out that my birthday would fall on Father's Day that year, I wasn't all that surprised. She teased me about how lucky I was to get double the gifts, promising something special. I kissed her on the cheek, hoping for a little extra surprise that day. She had a habit of teasing me playfully during foreplay, but when it came to my birthday or Father's Day, those playful hints usually turned into actual favors, with no strings attached. I wasn't naive, I knew something exciting might be coming my way. I was genuinely looking forward to an extra treat for my birthday. But then, as the days rolled on, something felt off. My wife, who was usually so predictable and grounded, started acting a bit differently. She began working later than usual, dressing up more for her bakery job, and even wearing makeup more often. It wasn't like her. Then came the moment that really threw me. She went out by herself on a Friday night. That was out of character for us. We were always close, preferring to spend time together rather than going out with others. Our marriage felt solid, and neither of us were particularly social outside of each other. So when I saw her that Friday night, all dressed up in a new skirt, tan stockings, high heels, and her hair done like she'd just left a salon, I figured we had plans. I even whistled, thinking it was a sign we were going to have a nice evening together. But she quickly dashed that idea, saying she was headed out with her coworkers. Surprised, I asked why she hadn't mentioned this earlier. She looked flustered for a moment and apologized, saying they had asked her last minute. I couldn't help but give her a suspicious look, wondering how she managed to pull herself together so quickly. My frustration started to build, and for the first time, I found myself questioning her honesty. Still, the idea that she might be cheating seemed absurd. She fit the perfect mold of a suburban wife and mother. Plus, our intimate life hadn't changed, it was just as good as ever, which only added to my confusion. She shrugged off my doubts, explaining that she had only worked half a day and wanted to look nice. I stood there, speechless, as she hurried out the door, leaving me to process everything. She didn't get home until almost midnight. Her hair was sloppily tied back, and just like that, any thoughts of her spending the evening with coworkers disappeared from my mind. She barely acknowledged me and went straight for the shower. Something wasn't right, but I couldn't put my finger on it. On the surface, everything seemed fine, but deep down, I knew trouble was brewing. With my experience working in retail, I had learned how to read people and situations, and this felt like one of those times when something was definitely off. Saturday morning came, and I left early for work. Oddly enough, Katie didn't wake up to say goodbye like she usually did. When I arrived at the store, Kelly, the barista with her fiery red hair and piercing blue eyes, was already there waiting by the entrance. I've always had a thing for redheads, even though I was completely satisfied in my marriage. "Hey, Paul," she called out as I made my way over. The doors were still locked since we had about half an hour before opening. Kelly had mentioned before that she wasn't too comfortable working with the night crew. "Morning, Kelly," I greeted her while unlocking the doors. She gave me a concerned look. "You doing all right, Paul?" You look a little down today, she observed. I sighed, admitting, just got a lot on my mind. She seemed curious but didn't push it. Hang tight. I'll grab you some of our best coffee, she offered. I forced a small smile and nodded. Sounds good. I'll be in shortly. After securing the doors, I made my usual rounds across the sales floor, checking in with the department managers. I didn't necessarily need to, my team always ran things smoothly, but I liked chatting with them, keeping the atmosphere upbeat. I believed it made a difference, and I think they appreciated it too. My last stop was the cafe, where Kelly had my large black coffee waiting. Here you go, Megamar's finest brew, she said, handing it over with a smile. Thanks, Kelly, I replied, sliding $2 across the counter. Keep your money, boss, she insisted, shaking her head. I can't take any chances, Kelly, I said. I cover my own expenses. Last thing I need is someone making a big deal with corporate over a $2 coffee. She gasped, looking a bit offended. Paul, I'd never do that. I know you wouldn't, but you'd be surprised what people can find to complain about. It's not worth the headache, I explained. She nodded understandingly. All right, boss, I get it. I waved her off and took a sip of the coffee. Some of the employees probably grabbed free coffee every now and then, but it wasn't worth stressing over. With everything I dealt with, complaints ranging from parking to HR issues, I wasn't about to make a fuss over a cup of coffee. The day was quiet for the most part. The most exciting thing that happened was an older lady trying to swipe bird and cat food, which at least gave me a little distraction from the worries gnawing at me from home. When I got back that evening, my wife and daughters were just about to head out to a concert with some friends. It was something they'd planned, but I had completely forgotten. My mind had been so preoccupied lately, it had slipped right past me. I had hoped to talk to Katie later, to try and work through the tension between us. Not knowing what had really happened the night before was eating away at me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. That night, curiosity got the better of me, so I decided to check her email. But to my frustration, I didn't find anything suspicious. No incriminating messages or anything that confirmed my worst fears. I had no way to check her texts or call logs, and even rummaging through her clothes didn't give me any answers. She had already done her Saturday laundry. Defeated, I gave up and went to bed after watching a movie, still feeling that lingering unease. When my birthday and Father's Day finally rolled around, I started the morning in my usual way, some toast, a cup of coffee, and sitting out on the porch, soaking in the quiet of the early morning. The birds were chirping, and I found myself wondering what the day had in store for me. Around 9 a.m., I went inside to refill my coffee and noticed my wife and daughters were up, packing lunch. Curious about what was going on, I asked what they were up to. Sophie, my oldest, casually mentioned they were heading to the beach. That caught me by surprise. I realized they hadn't forgotten my birthday this time, something I usually had to remind them about when it came to important dates. Still, it puzzled me that Katie didn't seem to have anything special planned. Just then, my phone rang. I hoped maybe it was them calling to say they'd changed their minds about leaving, but it was my mom instead. Hey, Paul. Happy birthday and happy Father's Day, she said cheerfully. Thanks, Mom, I replied, trying to sound upbeat. Katie's got some big plans for you guys today, I bet, she added. Nope. She just took the girls to the beach, I told her. There was a pause before she said, really? That doesn't sound like her at all. I figured she'd whip up something special for breakfast and make the whole day about you, my mom commented. Yeah, I'm not sure what's going on lately. She's been acting kind of strange for a while now, I admitted, feeling a little lost. Well, don't worry too much about it, sweetheart. She's probably got something up her sleeve for later. I've gotta head off to church now. Love you, Paul. Love you too, Mom, I said before hanging up the phone. Her ever-optimistic nature and the close bond she had with Katie always warmed my heart, especially since Dad passed away a few years ago. As I stood there, still thinking about my marriage and the weird shift in things, my phone rang again. This time, it was my assistant. "Hey Paul, there was an incident at the coffee shop this morning." "What happened? Was Kelly involved?" I asked, concerned. "Yeah, unfortunately. A customer shoved her on the stairs, and she lost her balance. Looks like she might have broken her arm. They've taken her to St. Alex's for x-rays." "Damn, poor girl. Do you need me to come in and cover her shift?" I offered. "No, everything's under control. I just wanted to give you a heads up for tomorrow. Sorry to bother you on Father's Day." "No worries. Thanks for letting me know," I replied, feeling bad for Kelly but trusting that they had it handled. With no one home, I decided to grab some breakfast at IHOP. The place was packed with families celebrating Father's Day, and after a while, it all started to feel a little overwhelming, like I didn't quite belong. Before I could get too caught up in the emotion of it all, I left and headed to McDonald's instead. I found a quiet spot in the park, sitting there with my coffee and orange juice, and started reminiscing about the days when I'd take the girls out boating when they were younger. Those were some of the best times. But now, with them getting ready for college, they felt more distant, spending most of their time with their mom. Maybe that was for the best, I thought, trying to convince myself. The day was slipping away, and the more I thought about it, the less I believed there'd be any special dinner waiting for me when I got home. I grabbed a Reuben sandwich at the Doctor Who-themed cafe, and while I was eating, I got a notification. It was a Facebook post from my mother-in-law, talking about their beach trip. My wife must have been posting photos of their day out, which kind of stung, considering it was both Father's Day and my birthday. Feeling a little down, I decided to head over to a sports bar, hoping it might lift my spirits. But even with the noise and the game on, I couldn't shake the sadness that had been following me all day. So, I left and made my way to a cigar lounge instead. There, I treated myself to an Opus X and settled in to watch the game. A couple of older guys nearby invited me to join them in a card game. "I'm Paul," I introduced myself, shaking their hands. "I'm Greg, and this here's my brother," one of them replied with a grin. They welcomed me into their game of 5-card draw, and Greg gestured toward a cooler on the floor. "Grab yourself a drink, Paul." I thanked him and pulled out a Miller Lite. "So, no kids today? Or did the ex take them off with her new guy?" Luke joked, smirking. I frowned a little. "No, my wife and daughters are at the beach. Seems like they've forgotten what day it is." "Tough break," Greg chimed in. "I hardly ever see my boys anymore, both of them are in the service." Luke nodded. "My daughter's out in California. My grandson, Charlie, just turned 2. I'm heading out there next week to see them." "That sounds great," I replied, feeling a pang of nostalgia. As my girls were hitting 17 and 18, I couldn't help but miss the days when they were little. They both nodded in understanding, and the conversation eventually drifted back to my wife. "Do you think she really forgot your birthday, or is she just avoiding you?" Luke asked, voicing the question that had been gnawing at me all day. I started recounting all the strange things that had been happening recently, especially what went down on Friday night. Both of them listened closely before shaking their heads. "She's cheating on you," Greg said bluntly, and Luke nodded in agreement. I didn't want to believe it, but deep down, it was starting to make sense. "I don't know. I just can't wrap my head around it," I muttered, struggling to process what they were saying. Greg leaned in, his voice more serious. "Listen, Paul," he began, sharing his own story. "I've been where you are, Paul," Greg said, leaning in a bit closer. "The late nights, dressing up all fancy, the little signs of disrespect, it all starts adding up. I made the mistake of reacting too fast. When I found out my wife was cheating, I jumped straight to divorce. I thought it was the right thing to do, but looking back, I regret it. The financial strain, the emotional mess, it wasn't worth it. Trust me, if you still love her, consider forgiveness. Guys our age don't get many chances to fall in love again. I thanked Greg for his advice, even though deep down, I thought he was nuts. The idea of forgiving Katie seemed impossible. How could I ever trust her again? I shook both their hands, said my goodbyes, and left the lounge, feeling heavy with thoughts. Later that night, I was scrolling through Facebook on the couch when more photos of Katie and the girls at the beach popped up on my feed. They were smiling, laughing, looking like they were having the time of their lives. It crushed me. That was the last straw. I couldn't deny it anymore. My wife had completely forgotten my birthday and Father's Day, but worse than that, I was now convinced she had been unfaithful. The signs were all too clear, and ignoring them wasn't an option anymore. Determined to push forward, I decided to take myself out for dinner at my favorite steakhouse. Even if I had to wait for a table, it didn't matter. I needed to treat myself, even if no one else would. I headed out, craving a good steak. While waiting at the bar for my table, an older man took the seat next to me. He glanced at the champagne bottle in front of me, frowned a little, but didn't say anything, opting for a martini instead. As the bartender refilled my glass, the man couldn't help but ask, "Celebrating alone, or did someone bail on you?" "Just me," I replied, offering a small smile. He nodded, taking a sip of his drink. "I'm waiting for my family," he said. 3 generations strong. Though my daughter broke her arm earlier today, he added with a chuckle, clearly amused by the idea that even grown kids still find ways to hurt themselves. I nodded, appreciating his humor. "Looks like I'll be cooking solo for a bit too. My wife needs to take care of Kelly and Leah, so I'll be left to my own devices for a while," I joked, though the truth felt heavier than I let on. Before I could say more, a little girl came running across the crowded bar, yelling, "Grandpa," as she showered the man with hugs and kisses. Not long after, I heard my name. I turned and saw Kelly and her mom walking toward me, the family resemblance between them striking. "Hey, Kelly. How's your arm?" I asked, genuinely concerned. "Not too bad, thanks. The painkillers are kicking in, but when it happened, it was rough," she replied with a slight grimace. Kelly introduced me to her parents, Michael and Barbara, as well as her sister, Leah. "So where's your wife, Paul?" Barbara asked, clearly curious. "I'm not sure," I said, trying to keep my voice casual. "She took the girls to the beach this morning, and I haven't heard from them since. On Father's Day and your birthday, no less." "That's awful," Barbara exclaimed, her shock apparent. "What's going on with her?" I didn't feel like getting into the details, so I just shrugged it off. "Forget about her," Barbara insisted, waving a hand. "You're joining us for dinner." Michael, sensing the direction of the conversation, gave me a knowing smile. "You don't want them ganging up on you, Paul," he chuckled. He clearly understood how these situations could go. "Thanks, but it's your day." "I don't want to intrude," I protested, trying to politely decline. "Nonsense," Michael replied firmly. "This is our day, Paul. Grandpa's day." Just then, their table's buzzer went off, and Michael tossed a $2 bill on the counter before standing up. "We'll see you at our table," he insisted with a grin. "Sorry about that, Paul. My parents can be pretty stubborn," Kelly apologized with an embarrassed smile. "Don't worry about it, Kelly. Eating alone would have been worse," I assured her. Dinner was light-hearted, full of stories about our kids. Leah giggled uncontrollably at the tales of her mom's antics as a kid, and it made the evening feel a little brighter. At one point, my phone rang, vibrating on the table, but I ignored it, letting it go to voicemail. "Your wife?" Barbara asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yeah," I admitted, feeling a knot in my chest. It's complicated. Maybe you can find it in yourself to forgive her, Barbara suggested softly, glancing over at Michael for support. I waved down the server to get the check, feeling thankful for their company, and decided to treat them to dinner. As I signed the receipt, my mind wandered back to the advice I'd been hearing all day. Despite the lack of hard evidence, I couldn't shake the gut feeling that something was seriously wrong with Katie. The phone buzzed again, but I ignored it. When I got home, my daughters greeted me at the door with hugs and apologies for forgetting Father's Day. "Girls, it's okay," I told them, doing my best to sound calm. "I don't expect you to remember everything." But then Sophie's expression suddenly shifted. "Wait, today's your birthday too?" she asked, her face paling as she realized. She ran into the house, shouting for her mom. "Daddy, we didn't know. We're so sorry. You must hate us." Sophie cried, tears already welling up. "No, sweetheart, of course not. I love you girls more than anything. You didn't know, it's fine," I reassured her, doing my best to hide the anger bubbling just beneath the surface. My frustration wasn't directed at my daughters, it was between me and Katie. I headed upstairs to change, leaving the commotion behind, needing some space to clear my head. When I came back downstairs, I found Katie sitting by herself, crying quietly. "I'm sorry," she whispered, but I just shook my head, brushing past her to step out onto the deck. I grabbed a beer and a cigar, hoping the calm evening air might settle my mind, though it felt like a cruel joke compared to the storm going on inside me. A few moments later, Katie came outside, her voice hesitant. "Paul, But I couldn't hold it in anymore. "What's his name?" I demanded, my voice cold and sharp. She didn't answer. That silence was all I needed to confirm what I had feared. Right then, it hit me, I was headed for divorce. Marrying her had been a mistake, and now, after nearly 20 years, it was all unraveling in front of me. The worst part wasn't just the betrayal, but the haunting questions that followed. How long had she been unfaithful? Was this the first time? Did I even know the guy? And a darker thought crossed my mind, were my daughters really mine? It's shocking how quickly your mind goes to the worst places when someone breaks your trust. I made up my mind right then and there that I'd ask for paternity tests for the girls, not just for my peace of mind, but to embarrass Katie in the process. That night, I stayed up late researching divorce laws online before finally passing out on the couch, alone, on my birthday. At 5 a.m., I woke up groggy and disoriented. Katie was still asleep in our bed, curled up around her pillow, looking peaceful. I hated to admit it, but she was still beautiful. But she wasn't mine anymore. After a quick shower, I left the house quietly, not wanting to wake her. In the hallway, Sophie was waiting for me. "How bad is it, Dad?" she asked, her voice small and filled with worry. "As bad as it gets," I sighed, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on me. "Can you forgive her?" "It was just one day, one mistake," she pleaded, her eyes filled with hope. "Honey, it's more than forgetting my birthday or Father's Day." "She cheated on me," I said quietly, bracing myself for her reaction. "No, Dad. She wouldn't do that. There has to be a reason, maybe something pushed her to it, but I know she wouldn't just cheat on you," Sophie insisted, desperate to defend her mother. "Think about it, Sophie. She's been acting strange for weeks. Friday night, she dressed up, looked amazing, but not for me." "That wasn't for me," I said, bitterness creeping into my voice. Sophie stayed quiet, clearly thinking hard about what I was saying. "She's been avoiding me all weekend, Sophie. She felt guilty, or maybe even resentful, maybe both. When has she ever taken you and your sister to the beach without me? That's always been a family thing." Sophie looked down, unsure of what to say. What if it wasn't an affair? What if it was just a one-time mistake? "Can't you forgive her?" she asked, her voice trembling with emotion. I doubt it was just one mistake, Sophie. And even if it was, has she shown me any love this weekend? When she went out with someone else, she left me behind. That's not love, sweetheart, that's selfishness, I explained, trying to help her understand. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she threw her arms around me, hugging me tightly. Please don't divorce her, she begged, her voice breaking. I have to head to work, honey, I said softly, gently pulling away. We'll talk more later, I said, watching as Sophie retreated into her sister's room. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Kelly came by, and I helped her with some paperwork for her accident. She was having a hard time filling out the forms with her left hand, so I guided her through it, making sure everything was done properly. How are things at home? Kelly asked, her expression filled with concern. Not good, I admitted. When I confronted her, she didn't even bother denying it. Damn, Paul. I'm really sorry, Kelly said, her sympathy genuine. Thanks, Kelly. But honestly, I don't really want to talk about it right now, I murmured, not ready to dive into the mess that was my marriage. Kelly nodded, understanding. I get it. My ex cheated on me when I was pregnant, and I kicked him out before the baby was even born. My mom wasn't thrilled about it, called me disposable. That's rough. I was surprised when your mom suggested I forgive my wife last night, I replied. Yeah, I noticed that too. Makes me wonder if something happened between my parents when I was younger, she admitted, her brow furrowed in thought. Well, if they're happy living a lie, that's their problem. I don't trust liars, I said, my voice hardening. I couldn't stand dishonesty, especially not from someone I trusted with my life. When I got home later that day, Katie wasn't there. I figured she was probably with him. Furious, I jumped in the car and drove to the grocery store where she worked, hoping to catch her. Sure enough, her car was parked in the back lot, and there she was, with a guy who couldn't have been more than his early 20s. She saw me and shouted something, but I didn't stick around to listen. If she was cheating, he could have her. That night, I packed my bags and moved into a hotel. Chloe and Sophie begged me to stay. Please don't leave, Dad, Chloe pleaded, her voice cracking with emotion. I have to go, I told them gently. Your mom's been cheating on me. I saw her with another man today. There must be some mistake, Chloe insisted, shaking her head in disbelief. There's no mistake, I said firmly. I saw it with my own eyes. Tears welled up in her eyes as she sobbed, please don't break up our family. Honey, your mom did that, not me. I love you both so much, and I'll be in touch every day, I reassured them, though it didn't make leaving any easier. I drove away, leaving them in tears, and Katie nearly hit me as she sped out of the driveway, but I didn't care. The following week was pure torture. Katie bombarded me with calls and messages, begging for another chance. Her family tried to intervene, reaching out to get me to talk to her, but I ignored every attempt. I wasn't going to play their games. Even my daughters tried to convince me to forgive her, but I couldn't. Eventually, I met with a lawyer. I was willing to split the house evenly, despite having paid for most of it myself. Thankfully, I wouldn't have to pay alimony since Katie was capable of supporting herself. The only downside was that I didn't have solid proof of her affair, which could weaken my case. But I was ready to take my chances. Katie tried rallying her family against me, claiming she'd only cheated once, that Friday before my birthday. The whole thing felt surreal. Even my daughters started to turn on me, siding with their mother, until I lied and told them a DNA test was court-ordered. That shut things down fast. Then, out of the blue, I got a letter from Katie. In it, she admitted to having a fling with a 21-year-old. That was all the proof I needed. With that, the divorce proceedings finally started to swing in my favor. Despite her resistance, the judge approved the terms I had proposed, and the divorce was set to finalize in 60 days. After that, I was left pretty isolated. Even my mom stopped talking to me, choosing to side with Katie. It hurt more than I expected, but I stayed firm. Every day, I called my daughters, leaving messages even when they didn't respond. I wasn't going to let them forget that I was still here for them. The one bright spot during that difficult time was my Sunday morning coffee with Kelly and Leah. We'd meet at a nearby coffee shop, and while Leah watched cartoons, Kelly and I would talk. She was someone I could lean on, someone who understood what I was going through. "Your daughters will come around, Paul," Kelly reassured me one Sunday as I sipped my coffee. Her words were comforting, though I knew the road ahead was still going to be rough. "Living with your wife, who knows what she's been telling them," Kelly remarked sympathetically. "I hope they'll come around," I replied, the weight of missing my daughters heavy on my shoulders. "I just miss them so much," I added, the loneliness hitting me harder than usual. The following week, I found myself back at the coffee shop, same time as always. I was just getting into a book when I heard a familiar voice. "Hey, stranger," Kelly greeted me with a warm smile. I looked up and waved her over. "Are you stalking me, or is this just part of your Sunday routine?" she teased as she sat down. "Nope, just live nearby," I said with a grin. "I like to come here for coffee and a little reading on Sunday mornings. It gets kind of lonely at home," I admitted. We chatted for a while, talking about the neighborhood and catching up on small things before going our separate ways. It wasn't planned, but meeting for coffee on Sundays soon became a habit, and before long, I realized I genuinely looked forward to seeing her. Leah, too, was a joy to have around, always brightening up the mood. The day the divorce was finalized, I found myself knocking on the door of what used to be my house. Katie answered, her eyes red and puffy from crying. Without a word, she motioned for me to come in. "Are the girls home?" I asked, scanning the familiar room. "They're at a school play," she replied quietly. "I knew you'd come tonight," she added, her voice trembling. "So, you waited until it was too late to stop it, huh?" I said with a bitter smile. "Yes," she admitted, her voice cracking. "I knew if I begged, you might listen, but I couldn't let that happen. You broke my heart, Katie." "There's no coming back from that," I said coldly. "It was one mistake, Paul. Why couldn't you just forgive me?" she pleaded, tears streaming down her face. I met her gaze, my voice steady. "Did you love me when you were with him? Did you love me when you ignored me on my birthday? If that's your idea of love, then we were never on the same page to begin with. I never wanted this to happen," she sobbed, her shoulders shaking. "And I never wanted a wife who cheated," I shot back, my words like ice. "But here we are." She tried to speak again, but I cut her off. "You didn't just break my heart, you turned my own mother and daughters against me. I'll never forgive you for that." "You're overreacting," she said, her voice hardening. "If you don't fix this with our family, I'll make sure every man you date knows exactly what you did," I warned. "I don't need anyone else," she snapped, her anger flaring. "Wrong answer," I said, standing up to leave. "I'll find other ways to make you regret it." As I turned to go, she grabbed my arm, desperate. "It's not my fault," she cried. "Oh really? Did I cheat on you?" I pulled my arm free. "You've set an example for our daughters, showing them it's okay to cheat and just call it a mistake. Well, I'm not going down because some guy made you feel attractive again." "Rot in hell, Paul," she spat as I walked out the door, completely unfazed by her tears. A few weeks later, Kelly knocked on my office door. "Got a second, Paul?" "Sure, come on in," I said, curious about the serious look on her face. "Does the company have any rules about dating coworkers?" she asked, and my heart sank. I had been thinking about asking her out, but it seemed I might have missed my chance. "No," I said, trying to sound casual. "But we have strict policies about harassment or favoritism. It's to protect everyone involved." Good, she said with a smile, leaving her address and phone number on my desk. Let's have dinner tomorrow night. Leah will be joining us. I couldn't help but grin. Sounds perfect, I replied, feeling a spark of excitement. Later that day, I left a voicemail for my daughters. Hey, it's Dad. Hope you and your sister are doing well. Not much going on here, except a coworker asked me out. Love you both, call me soon. I knew that might stir things up with Katie, but honestly, I didn't care. It was time for me to move on. I was grateful that Kelly had made the first move. Not only was she beautiful, but she had a kind heart, and her daughter was an absolute delight. For the first time in a long while, things were finally starting to look up. About 15 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a text from Katie. Already dating? You're such a fool. I chuckled at her reaction, shaking my head. She could think what she wanted. This time, I was finally moving on. I wasn't about to mourn the end of my marriage to a cheating wife. At 41, I still felt like I had plenty of time to find love again, maybe even have more kids. Kelly, being in her 30s, might want that too. It was early to be thinking about such things, but I knew it could be a priority for her, especially as a single mom. As for me, I hadn't been with anyone in months, and the idea of moving forward felt right. The next evening, I showered, shaved, and dressed casually for dinner with Kelly. I checked myself in the mirror, still in decent shape, no extra weight, and my brown hair hadn't started turning gray yet. With a good job and savings, I figured I wasn't doing too bad for myself. I hoped Kelly might feel the same. I arrived at her house, feeling a bit nervous, carrying flowers, a bottle of wine, and a stuffed bear for Leah. When Kelly opened the door, I was momentarily stunned. Her red hair fell in soft curls around her shoulders, and her sundress showed off her legs. She was barefoot, her hot pink toenails matching her nails. Did I pass the test? She teased, smiling. God, yes, I blurted out, laughing at my own lack of composure. She chuckled, taking the gifts from me and welcoming me inside. Leah was glued to the TV, but her eyes lit up when I handed her the stuffed bear. I knelt beside her, smiling. This is for you. Her face sparkled with joy as she grabbed the bear and ran off to show her mom. Watching her, I couldn't help but think about Sophie and Chloe when they were that little. It made my heart ache for them even more. Kelly noticed the look on my face. What's wrong? She asked softly. I forced a smile. Just thinking about my girls when they were that age. Is it really that bad? She asked, concerned. They still won't talk to me, I admitted. Katie's turned them against me. I leave messages every day, and I won't stop trying, but I can't change their minds. I'm so sorry, Paul. That's gotta be really tough, she said, her sympathy genuine. But I'm sure they're listening to your messages. I hope so. I mentioned our dinner tonight, and Katie sent me a text, calling me a fool for moving on so quickly, I said, shaking my head. Kelly bit her lip, looking a little uneasy. Am I moving too fast? She asked, her voice a bit hesitant. Maybe, I admitted honestly. But I'm happy to find out. She smiled and took my hand. Dinner's ready. I hope you like pasta with meat sauce. Sounds perfect, I said, feeling more at ease. Oh, and I've got garlic bread too, so be prepared for some serious couch makeout time later, she teased, making me laugh. After dinner, as we settled in with some wine, Kelly leaned into me. Being a mom is the best part of my life, but moments like this, these are special too, she said softly. I wrapped my arm around her, and she nestled closer. It gets even busier with 2 kids, I said, thinking of my daughters. Do you think they'll come around? She asked, her voice gentle. I hope so, I replied, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on me again. She kissed me on the cheek and set her glass down. Paul, I've made it clear that I really like you. I'm not playing games. I want to keep seeing you, and I want this to be serious. I'm not looking for casual flings. I opened my mouth to respond, but she raised a hand to stop me. I know you want to be a gentleman, but you don't have to be. I need something real, and my daughter needs a father figure. That's what I'm offering. Wow, I said, impressed by her straightforwardness. It wasn't often someone laid it all out like that. Kelly smiled and squeezed my hand. So, what do you say? I hesitated for a moment, then nodded. I've always been a family man. I wasn't interested in dating, and if my wife hadn't cheated, I'd still be married. But I like where this is going. She grinned and leaned in, kissing me softly. Good, because I like where this is going too. That night, we didn't rush into anything. We just enjoyed the closeness, knowing there was time to see where things would lead. We both agreed to take things slow, giving each other the respect and space we needed. Not long after, fate handed me an odd twist, one that I couldn't have seen coming. The guy who had helped ruin my marriage applied for a night manager position at my store. The moment I saw him, I knew exactly who he was. On his second shift, I left a 40-inch TV in his car, one that matched the stock we had just unloaded. The next morning, I casually walked him to his car. "Did you buy that TV?" I asked, feigning surprise. "No, Paul, it's not mine." "I have no idea how it got there," he stammered, looking nervous. "Let's head back to the store and figure this out," I suggested, leading him inside. Back at the store, I discreetly covered the security cameras, knowing there was no night crew on shift. He was panicking, insisting he was innocent as I made a show of calling the police. In the end, he got off with a misdemeanor in community service, but he lost his job, and that was more than enough for me. A few weeks later, on a chilly Saturday morning, I parked next to Kelly's car. She was waiting for me with a smile, and when I walked up, she greeted me with a kiss. "Dinner tonight still on?" I asked, feeling relaxed. "Absolutely. I'm making something special," she replied, beaming. Before I could say anything more, I heard a voice I knew all too well. "We need to talk about the girls and college," Katie said, her tone irritated. I turned to see her standing there, looking as if she had plenty to say. Kelly shot her an annoyed glance as I faced her. "They can go wherever they want," I said coolly. "I've already handled their finances. But thanks to you, they won't even talk to me." Katie's face tightened. "The girls are worried you won't cover their tuition." Kelly couldn't help but laugh. "Lost them in the divorce, huh?" she quipped, earning a sharp glare from Katie. "You've ruined everything," Katie spat angrily at me. "One mistake, and now I've lost my marriage, my family, my daughters, and even my own mother. You better not even think about dating anyone else, or I'll make sure you never have a second date," she threatened. Kelly didn't waste any time with her response. "No one's lining up to date a cheating woman unless they're looking for something easy," she snapped, her words cutting. I started to walk away, heading toward the store, but the shouting behind me made me turn back around. Kelly had gotten right in Katie's face, pinning her against the car. "Stay away from my man," Kelly hissed, jabbing her finger at Katie. I rushed back, pulling Kelly away from her. "Stop it, Kelly. She's not worth it," I said, trying to defuse the situation. "You heard me," Katie spat, storming off in tears. "Please, Katie, just go. It's over, and that's on you," I called after her, watching her leave. I caught up to Kelly, taking her hand. "I'm sorry, Paul. I got way too territorial," she admitted, a bit embarrassed. "No worries. Parking lot fights are great for the ego," I joked, and we both laughed as we headed inside the store. Later that day, my phone rang. It was my mom, but the call dropped unexpectedly. Concerned, I didn't waste time and rushed over to her house, ignoring Kelly's calls along the way. When I arrived, the ambulance had already left. At the hospital, they told me she had passed away before even reaching the ER. Sitting alone in the lobby, I replayed her final words in my head, words I would never hear again. My phone rang. It was Kelly. "Hey, my mom just passed away," I said, my voice barely holding steady. "Oh, Paul. I'm so sorry," she replied, her voice full of sympathy. "Do you want me to come over?" "Yeah. I don't want to be alone right now," I admitted, feeling overwhelmed. "I'll be there as soon as I can," she reassured me, and I was grateful not to face this alone. Instead of heading home, I found myself driving to my old house. No matter what had happened between us, I needed to talk to my daughters. Their cars were parked in the driveway, and a wave of apprehension washed over me. At least Katie's car wasn't there, thank God. I wasn't ready for that confrontation. I walked upstairs and found Sophie in her room. "Daddy," she exclaimed, her eyes lighting up, but her joy was cut short when Chloe appeared behind her. "Did you come here to beg?" "You can leave," Chloe snapped, her tone biting. I took a deep breath. "Grandma had a heart attack this morning." "She passed away," I said, my voice breaking the tension like a sledgehammer. Both of their faces fell, stunned into silence. I added quietly, "I just thought you needed to hear it from me." With that, I turned and left, ignoring Chloe's call for me to wait. I couldn't face more conflict, not today. I drove to the lake where we used to spend our family days, hoping to find some peace. The cold breeze and still waters offered a small comfort, but soon enough, the tears welled up again, not just for my mom, but for the growing distance between me and my daughters. What had I done to make them resent me so much? Katie had shattered our family, but they couldn't see that. Lost in thought, I didn't hear them approach until it was too late. When I turned, I saw Katie and the girls standing nearby. "How did you find me?" I asked, keeping my gaze on the lake. "You forgot to turn off your location sharing on your phone," Katie replied softly. "Paul, I'm sorry about your mom," she added, her voice quiet and apologetic. "Yeah," I muttered, barely acknowledging her. "Do you regret her passing, or turning her against me?" Katie didn't say anything. I turned away, my emotions overwhelming me. "Just leave me alone. I can't handle this right now. I'll never forgive you." Katie's voice wavered as she spoke again. "The last time we talked, she told me she wouldn't speak to me again until I begged you to stop the divorce. She didn't even say she loved me before she hung up." "I'm so sorry, Paul," Katie said, tears in her voice, before turning to walk away. But Chloe's voice cut through the tension. "Dad, we're sorry too. Please forgive us for being so rude." Both girls rushed over to me, wrapping their arms around me tightly, and we all cried together. "It's not your fault, girls," I said through the tears. "Your mother's actions broke us apart." "We're sorry, Dad," Sophie whispered. "We just wanted you to forgive her. She loves you, it's obvious." "Not enough to stay faithful," I replied sadly. "I'm sorry, girls. I love you both, and I need you. You're heading to college soon, and I'll miss you. Let's not waste any more time." "We won't shut you out anymore, Daddy," Chloe promised. "I just wish Grandma had the chance to hear that," Sophie added, her voice heavy with regret. "Come with me, girls," I said, wiping my face. "You haven't seen my new place yet. Let's grab some pizza on the way." When we pulled into my driveway, I saw Kelly's car parked outside. I had completely forgotten she was coming over. "Looks like you're going to meet Kelly," I told the girls. "Is she your girlfriend?" they asked in unison, making me chuckle. "Well, we just started dating," I said, feeling my face warm a bit. "Look at him blushing, Chloe. So cute," they teased, jumping out of the car and rushing over to Kelly, bombarding her with questions before I could even introduce them properly. "Girls, give her a break," I called after them, laughing. "Help her inside," and I'll introduce you the right way. As I approached, Kelly smiled warmly, opening her arms for a hug. Your daughters? She asked, grinning. I nodded. Yeah. Come on, let's do this right. I introduced Kelly to the girls properly, and after a few cheeky comments from Chloe and Sophie, we were all laughing together. Let's do a quick tour of the house, I suggested, feeling a little more relaxed. Then I need to make some arrangements for my mom's service. I'll order pizza while you show them around, Kelly offered, smiling like she already knew what I was thinking. After dinner, we sat around sharing stories about my mom, and the girls even shared a few embarrassing tales about me, which Kelly found particularly amusing. The hours seemed to fly by, and before we knew it, it was past 10 p.m. Girls, it's getting late, I remarked. I don't have beds in the guest rooms yet. Can we stay the night? Chloe asked, her voice hopeful. Sophie looked at me hopefully. Can we stay? I'll tell you what, I'll pick you both up tomorrow and we'll have breakfast together, I suggested. Can we help sort through Grandma's things too? Sophie offered, her voice soft but determined. Thank you, honey, I said, touched by her offer. Then, turning to Kelly, I asked, would you like to join us? Or do you need to go home to Leah? She's with my parents, Kelly replied with a smile. Sophie perked up. Who's Leah? She's my 4-year-old daughter, Kelly explained, and the girl's eyes lit up. Oh, we have to meet her soon, Chloe chimed in excitedly. Kelly chuckled. Someday soon, I promise. Later, back at the house, Kelly and I snuggled on the couch. She rested her head on my shoulder, a content smile on her face. They're great girls, she said softly. I'm so glad you're reconnecting with them. I am too, I sighed, feeling a mix of relief and sorrow. I just wish it didn't take my mom's passing to bring us back together. With Kelly wrapped in my arms, I eventually drifted off to sleep, feeling a sense of peace I hadn't known in a long time. The next morning, I woke up with Kelly still nestled against me under the blanket. I kissed her forehead gently, whispering an apology for falling asleep. She stirred, stretching. It's okay, baby. You've been through a lot. Would you like to join us for breakfast today? I asked. Only if I can bring Leah, she replied with a smile. My parents have plans this morning. Of course. My daughters would love to meet her. Later that morning, I met my daughters at IHOP with Leah in tow. As soon as we walked in, Chloe and Sophie rushed over, greeting Leah with hugs and twirling her around. Leah's giggles filled the air as the girls whisked her away to the bathroom. I turned to Kelly, grinning. Think they'll get along? Kelly laughed, nudging me playfully. I hope they stay friends for years to come. It was just the start, but Kelly's commitment to something long-term reassured me in ways I hadn't expected. Over breakfast, my daughters and Leah bonded quickly, chatting about everything from cartoons to their favorite movies. Kelly fit in seamlessly, and for the first time, there was no tension or awkwardness from my girls. It felt like a fresh start for all of us, and I couldn't quite explain it, but something had shifted. Later that day, after a whirlwind of phone calls, cleaning out my mom's house, and making arrangements at the funeral home, I finally had a moment to breathe. Chloe and Sophie had come back for dinner, while Kelly and Leah had gone their separate ways after breakfast. Kelly had suggested it might be easier for Leah not to be around while I sorted through my mom's things, and I appreciated her thoughtfulness. Out of nowhere, Chloe looked up at me and asked, "Dad, are you in love with Kelly?" Caught off guard, I replied, "We've only seen each other a few times outside of work. It's too early to say it's love." Sophie, ever the skeptic, smirked. "Okay, Dad. But you know those cartoons where the girls get all dreamy-eyed and hearts start floating? That's Kelly when she looks at you." Before I could protest, the girls exchanged knowing glances and declared, "We like her." For a moment, my heart swelled with joy, but anger quickly followed. I set my pizza down and walked to the sink, trying to cool off. Daddy? Chloe's voice softened as she followed me. How could you shut me out for so long, and now you're okay with this? Do you know how many times I cried after leaving you messages, thinking you didn't care? You think I didn't care? I asked, turning to face her. I left you messages too. I thought you didn't want to hear them. Sophie stepped in, her face serious. It started with Mom. She told us that if you felt distant, you could come back to her and we'd be a family again. We're really sorry. I looked over at Chloe, and her eyes were filled with tears. She rushed over and hugged me tightly. Dad, we're so sorry, she whispered. When that didn't work, she told us you had abandoned us and wouldn't pay for college because you didn't want to stay with her, Chloe added, her voice thick with emotion. She made it sound like your messages during the divorce were just tactics to win in court. You believed her? I asked, my heart sinking. Imagine sitting with her every day, Chloe said quietly. Hearing her defend one mistake against 20 years of marriage. Would you forgive your boyfriend for cheating? There was silence. They couldn't give me an answer. Tears streamed down their faces as I pulled them into a tight hug. I've missed you both so much, I said, feeling the weight of the past slowly lifting off my shoulders. After we embraced, I reminded them, school's tomorrow. Make sure your mom lets them know about the wake and the funeral. You'll need some time off. One final hug, and I watched them drive off, feeling a warmth inside me that I hadn't felt in a long time. I looked up at the sky and whispered, Mom, I didn't need you to leave to bring my girls back, but thank you. I'll miss you. Wakes have always been tough for me. There's something about being near a body that never felt right. My mom's wake, though, was even harder. As I approached the casket and saw her peaceful face, I found some comfort in knowing she was now with my father. She'd planned everything with meticulous care, down to the casket she wanted. It was a relief, knowing she had taken care of everything. While I was chatting with one of her old friends, I saw Katie and my daughters arrive. The girls gave me tearful hugs, while Katie hung back, respectfully keeping her distance. After the prayer, I noticed Katie placing something in the casket before quietly moving to the back of the room. Curious, I walked over and saw it was a photo, one of me, Katie, and my mom, all holding our babies, smiling like we didn't have a care in the world. Touched, I picked up the photo and placed it near my mom's hands, tears welling up as I did. During the service, Katie stayed in the back, quietly chatting with a few family members. Despite everything that had happened between us, it was clear she still held a place in their hearts. The unspoken rule was that immediate family sat in the front, but seeing Katie sit alone at the back, with tears in her eyes, didn't feel right. I knew my mom wouldn't have wanted it that way. Walking over, I said softly, "Come here, Katie. No need to hide." She hugged me, whispering a quiet, "Thank you," before joining us in the front. My uncle offered her his seat, and even Kelly gave her a small nod of approval. Sitting there, holding Kelly's hand while my ex-wife sat nearby, was surreal. I just hoped it wouldn't stir up any trouble. As the last of the visitors left, Katie approached me. "Thank you for allowing me to be part of the family today," she said quietly. She offered to share the limo ride, but Kelly's hand on my waist reassured me there wouldn't be any tension. After Katie left, Kelly wrapped her arms around me in the kitchen, offering me a cold beer. "I think everything went well with Katie today," she said softly. "Yeah," I agreed, taking a sip. "I'm glad she didn't cause any trouble. I half expected her to." Kelly smiled. "The girls probably helped with that. Everything will be fine after tomorrow." "I hope so," I said, though a part of me still couldn't shake the paranoia that Katie and Kelly might clash again in the future. "Will you stay over tonight?" She squeezed my hand. "You couldn't kick me out if you tried." We didn't make love that night, but having her there beside me brought me the best sleep I'd had since the divorce. The next day, at the funeral, Katie's voice broke through my thoughts as we waited for the service to begin. I'm keeping a close eye on myself. I won't misuse your kindness by starting a fight, she said quietly. I know, I lied, still feeling uneasy inside. How do you think I feel? She asked with a wry smile. I'm the outcast here. A disgrace. No one sees you that way, Katie, I replied, though I wasn't entirely sure if I believed it myself. Especially not today, I reassured her, though deep down, I knew it wasn't entirely true. I'm sorry, Paul. I wish I could undo it all, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion, tears brimming in her eyes before she quickly excused herself and rushed off to the bathroom. As I watched her leave, Nancy, one of my mom's old friends, gently patted my shoulder. Your mom was wonderful, Paul. We're all going to miss her, she said kindly, her voice filled with warmth and sympathy. After the funeral, we gathered at a small Norwegian restaurant that my mom had always loved. I noticed Katie standing off to the side, looking unsure of where to sit, clearly feeling out of place. Without a second thought, I took her hand and led her to the table where Kelly and the girls were seated. Katie, you'll always be family, despite everything, I said softly. You're welcome to sit with us. A single tear rolled down her cheek as she looked at me, her gratitude evident. Thank you, she whispered. In that moment, something shifted inside me. I realized I had finally let go of the bitterness and anger I'd been holding onto for so long. There was no more need for resentment, it was time to move on. Life began to move forward after that. The girls started Skyping with me every week once they were off at college, and it felt like we were slowly building bridges. Kelly and I were growing closer, and I found myself thinking more and more about proposing. Everything felt right, and the idea of a future with her brought me peace. Katie and I didn't talk much, but when we did, the conversations were friendly. She was seeing someone now, a good guy, a single dad around her age. I wished them well. Some people might say I should have forgiven her for that one mistake, that I should have tried to make things work. But I couldn't. And maybe that makes me the villain in some people's eyes, but I've made peace with it. Most importantly, I've made peace with myself.